Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today we'll learn about interfaces, more specifically Java interfaces. What is the purpose? Why do we need them, and how we can use them. So, moreover, we will also discuss what is the basic difference between a class and the interface. So, let's move uh, and discuss the Java interfaces. Interface basically an interface is a reference type in Java, so it is used for the reference only, not no more detail about uh, the interfaces. So we'll discuss in a short while. It is similar to a class, but not exactly the class. Remember, there are two entities or the two main important things in Java. One of them is a class, and another one is the interface. So the basic difference you must know between them is the class usually holds or it is composed of the data members as well as the member functions. Whereas the interfaces they only hold the functions, so they do not hold the data or the data members. So the question can be uh, the question can be raised that if an interface do not have the data, so what is the purpose of the functions then? Because usually the functions defines the functionality which it perform on the data, right? So the interfaces basically they are used for such type of the functionalities when you do not have a specific functionality, right? For example, I'll give you an example of the keyboard. The keyboard in which, for example, we have a functionality, you only press the key, so there is a functionality. So it is not dependent on any of the data. So, for example, we can say that whenever the key is pressed, some functionality will be performed, right? But what will be that functionality? We're not sure about it. Once you are not sure about the functionality, you define it that functionality. But the functionality is there. That the key must be pressed, right? For example, once the key is pressed, for example, there can be a functionality that a circle is drawn, or there can be another functionality. Once the key is pressed, the window is closed, right? So there can be two different functionalities. So once you are not sure about the functionality, you define that functionality in an abstract way in an interface, where the class basically class holds a specific functionality, right? So it also holds a data as well, or the data members as well. So it is similar to the class, but not exactly similar. We'll see the similarities and differences in a short while. An interface basically it is a collection of abstract methods. It's very important that you should know that interfaces usually hold the abstract methods. We have already discussed in detail about the abstract methods and the abstract classes. So let's recall the abstract methods basically are those methods that do not have a specific functionality. If you still remember that in the last lecture we have discussed about the shape example. Shape is a generic class. It is the abstract class. Abstract in a way that it do not have any detail. The shape can be of any type. For example, it can be a circle, it can be a sphere, it can be a rectangle, right? So the shapes are different, but the shape it is a generic class. So it is the we will call the shape as the abstract class. So once we have defined an abstract class because abstract class is the class we're not sure about its specific particular functionality or its uh, shape. For example, what kind of shape can be there? It can be any of the shapes. So that will be the abstract class. So what are the abstract methods then? Abstract methods are the methods in which you're not sure about the functionality. As I have given an example in a short while of the key, for example, when the key is pressed, what will happen when the key is pressed? You're not sure about it. So you will be defining the key press function as the abstract method. So whoever want to use that function, because but the functionality should be there because there should be a feature of the key press. Whenever the key press, so it is at the discretion of the user or the programmer, whoever defines a specific functionality whenever the key is pressed. Either the window will be closed or the circle will be drawn when the key will be pressed. So it's up to you whatever the functionality you will define. But we need to define that functionality, and we'll define that functionality as in the form of abstract methods. I hope you got the point. So the interfaces basically they are composed of the abstract methods. The abstract methods, for example, we have seen in their examples, it will not have its body, but it will have only the prototype. You will define the return type of it. You will define the name of it, and that's it. You're not sure about what kind of the functionality will be there, but if it's accepting some arguments, you will also define them. For example, when the key is pressed, for example, there can be some event that will occur, so it will be accepting one event as an argument, so you will have to specify it. So you can define the number of arguments or the type of the arguments, the name of the function, and the return type of the function. That's it, no functionality defined. So that will be the abstract methods. So the interfaces is the collection of the abstract method. A class implements an interface, thereby inheriting the abstract method of the interface. Usually, whenever the interface is defined, it will be implemented. Implement is basically implements, it is a keyword, right, in the Java, as you might have been using in the case of inheriting a class. So what do you use while in what type of the keyword you use while inheriting a class? You define extends, right? Class A extends class B, class B, right? So whenever you will be actually inheriting the interface, you will be using the implements keyword for it, right? So that's an important thing to remember. So the class implements an interface, thereby inheriting the abstract method of the interface. So whenever a class that will be actually inheriting the abstract the interface, so that means all of the abstract methods defined in the interface can be used in that class, whatever will be, whoever will be the inheriting. Okay, next one is the also the function declared in the interface are public, static, and final by default. So all of the methods or the function which are defined within the interface, they will be public. That means you can access them anywhere, right? Uh, this is the access modifier you already know. So it is accessible anywhere, whatever the method will be defined in them. That means you can use that interface or the functionality of the interface as well anywhere that can be implemented. Another one is the static. You might already know about the static keyword. Static, whenever you define a member or the function as static, that means uh, the memory allocation for that member, for example, it can be a data member or the member function, it will be common for all of the instances of the objects. For example, I have declared a variable as static in the parent class, right? So for example, a class A is my parent class. Class A is there. I have a parent class, and I have three different classes which are being inherited by that parent class. And in the parent class, I have declared one data member as static member. So once it is static, that means all of the inherited classes, when they will instantiate, so all the childs will have the three different objects. Child classes will have three different objects. So the data member which is declared static, that will be common in all three objects. You got the point. The memory allocated or the memory location will be common for all the instances. So that is the static. So whenever the functions are declared in the interfaces, they are public, static, and final by default. You need not to define them. Whenever you define, they will be declared as because this is the functionality of the interface. They will be declared as public, static, and final by default. Final means you cannot change it, right? Once the function has been defined in an interface, you cannot change that function. Changing means that you cannot change the return type, you cannot change the name of the function, or you cannot change any of the parameters that is being accepted. So they are declared as final. So you cannot modify them. In the final, you already know, once the thing that has been initialized, that remains same throughout the whole program, right? It can never be changed. So whenever the interfaces are declared, they're declared final. You cannot change them. You, but you can define your own interfaces, but whatever the interface that has already been defined, you cannot change it. Okay, let's continue. Writing an interface is similar to writing a class as far as the syntax is concerned, but the class describes the attributes and the behaviors of the object, right? And an interface contains the behaviors that a class implements. So there is a difference between the class and the interface. In the class, as I have already explained, class is basically composed of the data members and the member functions, two components. Whereas the interfaces, they only contain the behaviors or the functions, right? And but those functions will not have the appropriate or the specific functionality. They will be abstract, right? So there is the basic difference. The class is composed of the data members and member function, but the interfaces only contains the member function, which are declared as abstract. Okay, there are two uses for the interfaces. One of them is to achieve abstraction, and another one is the multiple inheritance. Okay, that is very important. Abstraction means to achieve abstraction. Once, whenever you are not sure about the functionality, that should be declared as the abstract, right? So the interfaces are used to achieve the abstraction. You're not sure about the function. Whenever you are not sure about the functionality, but the functionality should be there, then you need to define it. Your interface will achieve this objective of the abstraction. Another one is the multiple inheritance in Java. As you already know, in Java, you can only inherit one class at a time, right? You cannot inherit multiple classes in Java. You already know it. But in case of, so there is a possibility that whenever you want to use more than one functionalities, then those functionalities should be defined in the form of interfaces. And the Java gives you this liberty to use multiple interfaces, and you can inherit multiple interfaces in Java. But if there is a class, you can only inherit one class at a time. If there are more than one interfaces, you can use them or implement them in one class. So there is a liberty with it. For example, I will give you an example. If, for example, we have discussed about the keyboard, but there's another functionality about the mouse. Keyboard and mouse, these are two different things, right? So if we define their functionality in the form of classes, then there is a limitation that either we can use a keyboard or you can use a mouse. But what if we want to use both of them in the same application? So that means you will have to define their functionalities in interfaces. The functionalities of the keyboard will be defined in one interface, and the functionalities of the mouse will be defined in another interface. So at the same time, you can use both of the interfaces. That is the advantage of the interface. That is the use of the interfaces. Otherwise, there's a limitation as far as the classes are concerned. You can only use one class at a time. But if there are interfaces, you can use the multiple interfaces in them. Okay. Java interfaces also represents is a relationship, right? As we have already discussed while discussing the inheritance, we have discussed is a and has a relationship. So interface basically is a member, right, of a class. Okay. Now we'll discuss the similarities and the differences between the uh, classes and the interfaces. Interfaces, first we'll discuss the similarities. An interface is similar to a class in the following ways. What are those ways? An interface can contain any number of the methods, right? Uh, as you have seen that there is a class, you have declared it, you can define any number of the methods in the class. Same with the case of the interface as well. There is no limitation, you can define any number of the methods in an interface, right? But the basic difference between both of them is that the class can have data member, but the interface cannot have a data member. Okay, I'm drawing the dissimilarities between the class and the interface as well, so that you can get a broader overview of the class and the interface. That is one difference. Another difference is that in the class, whenever you will define the methods, you will have to define their functionalities as well, right? It will have its body. You will have to. It's compulsory. You need to define their functionalities. At least it should have a body in case of the class. Regardless, it is empty. But the functionality a symbol must be there, and that is the opening and closing bracket. Okay. Whereas in the interface, whatever the method you will define, you cannot define their functionality. It will not have its body. It will be the abstract method, right? So that is the basic difference between the class and the interfaces. Uh, we will have the differences in the next slide, but with respect to that bullet, it was important to give you the overview between both of those classes and the interfaces. Interface is written in a file with a .java extension. So whenever you want to define an interface, you will be storing it in a .java file, right? And with the name of the interface matching the name of the class. It is also compulsory that the same with the class, as you might have seen, whenever you will have for example, a class that is your main class, because it will be holding a main body. So the name of the class and the file name should be same. That is the restriction as far as the Java is concerned. Similarly, it applies to the interfaces as well. Whenever you will have the interface, it will be stored in a separate file with the .java extension, but the name of the file and the name of the interface should be same. That is important. Okay, the bytecode of an interface appears in the .class. Same with the class file. As you might have seen that you have written your code in a class with the .java extension, and whenever you will compile it, it will generate .class file, which is the bytecode. Same is the case with the interfaces as well. You have declared an interface, you define an interface in a .java file, and whenever you will compile it, it will generate .class file, and it will be the bytecode. Interface appears in the packages, and their corresponding bytecode files must be a directory structure that matches the package name. So, if for example you have some specific project, and whatever the classes and the interfaces it will have, definitely you will keep them in the same package, and you can have the hierarchy of the packages and representing your interfaces, and you can use them, because the interfaces can also be actually they can also extend the classes, right? We'll discuss it in later on. Do not get confused at this moment. Okay, what are the differences between the interface and the class then? uh, I think I will have to discontinue it, and we'll discuss it in the next video lecture. We'll discuss their differences. Okay, see you.